Social media post believed to be Bryan Kohberger's.
Breaking news on the Idaho case.
In his own words, social media post believed to be Bryan Kohberger's.
As we learn more about the suspect in this gruesome case,
newly uncovered social media posts painting a clearer picture of who Bryan Kohberger was as a teen.
Bryan Kohberger was someone who was struggling a lot in his teenage years.
I'm just putting the dots together.
And it is uncomfortable to hear this because we're talking about innocent kids who were killed in that home.
Imagine this. It's about 10 a.m. on a blistery, cold winter morning in a small college town, and you're rushing off to your next class, fumbling with books and already thinking about your next cup of coffee because you're exhausted. You didn't sleep well last night, worried that the deadbolts you used to lock your doors weren't going to be enough to protect you from what's lurking outside in the darkness of the night. You can't even focus because everyone's been talking about the terrifying attacks that happened just a mile away from where you sleep, and so you log on to a Facebook detective group hoping to uncover the monster in the dark. Now, you begin chatting with one user in particular who seems to have very convincing information. He posts almost daily about the evidence, the motive, the suspect, and the victims, but as you continue to chat, you notice an increasing tension. He's getting angry, and you start to feel uneasy, almost threatened. And then you notice that he posted about a discovered knife sheath long before the police ever did. How did he know about that? At this point, you're feeling anxious with the increasing hostility in the comments, and you're wondering, who is this guy? And why haven't they caught someone? As the days drift away in a blur, taken over by the swelling fear in the town, you turn on the news and hear the words, "A suspect has been arrested. His name is Bryan Kohberger." And you feel the whole town exhale. But then you notice that angry person you've been chatting with suddenly stopped posting, never to return. And a menacing thought goes through your mind. Was I chatting with a killer? And this is what we know. Hey you, welcome back. We are diving straight into part 2 of our deep dive into the ongoing Moscow, Idaho case and the tragic loss of 4 innocent, lovely college students, Xana Kernodle, KYLIE Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, and Ethan Chapin. Now, in part 1, we covered a bit about their lives and how devastating this has been for their families and friends and just the whole community. I think anytime we cover these types of cases, it is important to always try and keep the victims and survivors front of mind. In part 1, we also covered what we know about the arrested suspect, Bryan Kohberger, and laid out a full and complete timeline of the night that it happened, the affidavit, the items recovered during the search of his home, and the timeline leading up to his arrest. So if you haven't seen part 1, I highly recommend it to help provide some clarity to this very alarming and often confusing case. Now, what I didn't cover in depth in that one were the details surrounding Bryan's online presence and social media posts, both those that have been verified and those that are heavy in speculation right now. So that's what we're going to be doing today, as there are some truly unbelievable, disturbing posts that Bryan is believed to have made that I think not only show that he was likely connected in some ways to the victims, but that he may have been trying to involve himself in the investigation. As always, I will break this down into 3 parts: the verified bits, the sketchy bits, and let's just say the speculative bits. Now, essentially all of his online presence has been taken down or privated, but we all know the internet is forever, child, and I've gone through and pulled out all of the little pieces that he left behind that I could, and I want to dig into several things that he posted that I think give a lot of insight inside the mind of Bryan Kohberger, something I haven't really seen covered much, and I do think it's important, as there might have been warning signs when he was just 15 years old. But before we get into all of this, hi, my name is Swoop, welcome. I'm a documentary filmmaker and I am obsessed with stories that challenge what I thought I knew about them. So if you're into mind-bending deep dives that tell stories from a new, fresh perspective, you have come to the right place. If that sounds good to you, please go ahead and tickle the like button, right under the chin. Also hit subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss a single deep dive. And as always, everything that we cover is alleged. These These are my opinions based on my research. Please do share your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any information regarding this case, please do contact the FBI tip line immediately. Now, this doc is sponsored, and I will be donating a portion of the sponsor proceeds to the Xana Kernodle Scholarship Endowment and the Ethan Chapin Memorial Scholarship Fund in honor of the victims and the survivors of this horrible situation. As y'all know, your support and the sponsors are the reason that I'm even able to make these docs in the first place, as well as these donations. So thank you for watching and checking out the sponsors each week. So real quick with the sponsor, and then we will jump into Bryan's disturbing posts. So, do y'all have a morning routine? Like, I don't know about you, but this year I've been finally trying to prioritize a little self-care, and one of the most rewarding and simple ways I've been able to do this is through wearing fragrances. But when I was first getting into fragrance, honey, have you seen some of these designer fragrance prices? Which is why Scentbird is a game changer. So, Scentbird is reimagining everything about how people discover, shop for, and experience fragrances, giving you full control on how you want to pamper yourself and express your individuality through fragrance. Scentbird is a monthly service that lets you choose a new designer fragrance every month, so there are no surprises. They have perfumes, colognes, and lots of unisex options, and we are talking designer. Scentbird carries brands like Prada, Gucci, Versace, and indie labels like Skylar, Heretic, and Confessions of a Rebel. And with each fragrance, you get a full 30-day supply, and honestly, like, mine have lasted a lot longer than that. I mean, literally look at how much bigger this is than those samples that you get from the store. And they come in these amazing vials that travel so well. You simply pull the magnets apart to open and remove the vial, slide it back in, snap it to close, and to use, you just twist the top to unlock the vial and spray, and twist back to lock it in place. And what's great is this lets you try out fragrances before committing to a full-size bottle, or you can do like me and try something new every month. So this month I received 3 delicious fragrances. I got Magnetic Wood by The Harmonist, which is an energizing fragrance with notes of cedar, bergamot, mimosa, and sandalwood. Oh, that just like, yes, that just makes me feel like energized. Oh, I love that. I also got Urban Rose by Skylar. Oh my gosh, that is like a slice of heaven. It has this very vibrant, yummy scent with notes of pink pepper, magnolia, and amber. And I also got Red Velvet by Pink Sugar. Oh my gosh, that smells so freaking delicious. Okay, no, this is my favorite one. This is my favorite. Oh my gosh, just bathe me all up in it. So to join me in elevating your self-care and boosting your mood, tap the link in the description to check out Scentbird and use code SWOOP8 to get 55% off at Scentbird. It's just a little over $7 for your first month, which is such an amazing deal. So tap the link and use code SWOOP8 to get 55% off and treat yourself to the luxury and self-care that you deserve, honey. Okay, back to the doc, and I smell so good. Now, before starting, I again want to extend my deepest condolences to the families and their friends of the 4 who lost their lives. Again, Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan. Now, we're going to be focusing a lot on Bryan today, but I don't want their stories to get lost in the coverage of the case. Again, Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan were real people with bright futures that were just stolen from them and their families in the worst imaginable way, and just far too soon. And I hope more than anything at this point that the 4 of them felt just how loved they were when they were here, and I hope that in time their families can find some ounce of healing and that their memories will always be a blessing.
Innocent is something else. Innocent is that you believe he did not do this. Do I have it accurate?
Okay, let's start at the beginning of Bryan Kohberger's traceable online interactions. I'm talking 2009, when Bryan was just 14 years old, about to turn 15, on a site called Tapatalk. Now, I didn't know what Tapatalk was before researching, so if you're not familiar with it, here's the gist. It's a forum hosting platform, sort of like Reddit, but it's kind of more old school. Users make their own communities or forums that are focused on just like one niche thing. Now, Bryan allegedly went by the username XR, which we believe to be Bryan for several reasons. Now, one, because XR matches an email account belonging to Bryan at the time, and we strangely know this because there was a leak of account information from an online payment company where we see Bryan linked to the email address and a physical address in Effort, Pennsylvania, where Bryan grew up and was living at the time. And in the post, he mentions his birthday, which also lines up, and well, there's also the picture, right? I mean, we could see that it's Bryan in the picture. So on Tappa Talk, Bryan was a member of a community of people who suffered from visual snow. Now, Swoop, okay, what the heck is visual snow, you ask, right? Well, let's dig into this real quick. So to quote directly from the Cleveland Clinic, visual snow syndrome is a disorder that causes you to see static. Some describe it as seeing things in a snow globe that's been shaken up. There are flickering dots throughout your field of vision. So essentially, if you were experiencing visual snow, your view would look something like this right now, but like not just at your screen, at everything. And again, it's a super uncommon thing. Like they estimate that VS only affects about 2 to 3% of people in the world, which is still a lot of people, but it's, you know, it's a small percentage comparatively. But the symptoms that come along with it are broad, affecting a lot more than just vision. So VS can come in combination with everything from tinnitus, which is, you know, like that high-pitched ringing in your ears, or migraines, depression, anxiety, or just like straight up depersonalization. Now, it can cause a great deal of stress, as you can imagine, which is super crappy because stress just makes visual snow even worse, like a lot of chronic conditions. Now, sometimes it just seems to go away, and sometimes it just continues to get worse for people. Currently, we don't even know what causes visual snow, and there's also no standardized treatment for it. So the users of this particular forum on Tappa Talk were constantly coming up with new theories and ideas on how to treat their symptoms. Now, in Bryan's very first posts on the VS community forum, he lays out a series of yes and no, like short answer questions, which feels a lot more like an intake or an assessment form from a doctor's office about visual snow. Quote, do you ever see these random dots of light in your vision? Do you seem to see the VS make stuff blurry, hard to see even with vision correction? Are your eyes sensitive to light? Did this happen after a migraine? Does this ever make you feel less aware? Do you have tinnitus? Do you feel like you can't see because of the severity? Now, then Bryan goes on to let his feelings out a little bit more in the same post with a major question. Quote, can migraine auras cause this? I know that the visual sensitivity to light had to do with it, but after the migraine meds, is it possible this will disappear after a while? I'm 15 in 21 days and don't want to wish I'll fade away because of this horrible thing. Now, we know from digging through all of these posts that he believes that he started suffering from visual snow on September 21st of 2009, which was 2 months before this first post that he made. And we see that he's struggling, right? And we will continue to see this struggle progress over the next 2 years. Bryan only posts a few other times within like a few days of his first one, again, mostly just describing symptoms and doctor visits. And after that, the account goes silent for over a year until on January 15th, 2011, Bryan posted a new thread titled, I believe this to be the cause of VS. I have had VS since September 21st of 2009. Since then, I have changed mainly from the anxiety and sense of derealization and hopelessness. And he still believes that migraines are the cause at this point, or rather like inflammation in the head or brain. And his theories on how it works, mainly pointing to candida, which is a type of fungal infection from yeast, which quite a lot of people deal with, and that it has to do with like nerve roots and vein roots, and that it's an inflammatory disease. Now, in April, Bryan claims that he knows the cause and cure of visual snow, and the cure is a detox diet. I know we're getting a little technical, but it's important that you have context about what he says that he has been going through before we start really digging inside of his mind here. Now, he is very convinced that he is correct, even though for the most part, the other people on the forum say that they have tried different diets and detoxes and nothing worked. And he insists that they are wrong and haven't done the right diet. But like, hold up a sec. Okay, so can we go back and look at that emoji of a head with a knife through it? Like, honestly, like, I didn't even know there was such an emoji. Like, why is this an emoji? People, programmers, I don't know what you all doing over here, but like that, okay. I mean, that was a choice. Anyways, okay, I digress. So we can perhaps infer that this is where and why Bryan became obsessed with his diet, which has been largely rumored in present day. We know now that, Bryan became very strictly vegan, that he made his parents buy new pots and pans so that when they would cook his food, meat had never touched those pans, even if they were washed. And perhaps this all ties back to his VS that he was dealing with as a teenager. We also learned through the Tapatalk VS forum that he's tried medications to treat his VS and that they did not work and that they made him crazy. Those are his words, not mine. But he also said, "I care about everyone here." And then he goes on 3 days later to post and say, "I want to express our struggles through rap. I think people should know." And people on the forum are, they're encouraging him to do so. And lo and behold, shortly after, a new SoundCloud account pops up with the name XR, and it is Bryan from Effort, United States. So Bryan Kohberger literally rapped his past, which is just like, nothing is going to surprise me anymore about any of this stuff and all of the things that I cover on a regular basis. Okay, now there's only ever been one track posted, and it's called Rise Up Instrumental Dash Test. So great title. Now the song is literally still there today. If as of making this video, it is still up and you can listen to it. And by all of our knowledge, we believe that this is in fact Bryan Kohberger rapping. If y'all want to hear it, it does exist out there. Now, instead of talking about VS, it starts off talking about his feelings of derangement, and we get the first glimpse of him talking about violence in this song. Now let's take a look at it, and you can read along because of course someone on Reddit has transcribed the lyrics, which I think they were mostly correct, but I believe they made a few typos, so we will fix them. Now, the opening few lines may just possibly be the biggest insight into his mind, at least at that time. Here they go. "Always the same thing that disrupts my life. Wonder when I'll change. I guess when the time is right. Procrastinating my derange. To change would be a fight. So I'm pacifist like I'm afraid to get a bloody fist." Is this him telling us that he's stuck and he doesn't like where he is stuck, but he feels like violence is a way to free himself? Let me know in the comments what y'all think about these lyrics. So the second half of his rap changes from an introspective to sort of this me versus you thing. Now I'm not really sure who the you is, but here's some more lyrics. "Here's a cookie too and a present led from a desert eagle," which if y'all don't know, that desert eagle is a gun. "Eagle's going louder than my motherfucking beagle." Now I think he says giggles but pronounces it geegles here. "And you got no sequel. Leave your loved ones crying like some seagulls. You are not my equal. You are evil, but I'm evil." Now I'm pretty sure here he doesn't actually say I'm evil. I think he says devil but pronounces it devil. So you are evil, I'm devil, I'm more evil than you. Okay, this is a mess, okay? The timing is off, it's clunky, the word painting is just not good. But we're not here to shit on how good he spits bars, okay? Mad bars, or his lack of experience rapping. He was a kid, who cares? Reddit has covered that immensely, okay? They be shading all the shade on Reddit. But let's look at what he's actually trying to send as a message to the world. Now, let's look at that last bit one more time, but I'm just gonna put it in plain English for context. "Keep it up, act like you're all that. I'm going to shoot you and giggle louder than my dog. While you're unalived and your loved ones are crying, I'm better than you, you're evil, but I'm the devil." Does that put it in a little more context? So to summarize, this song that he hinted at was going to be about visual snow actually turned into this message from Bryan. I'm stuck. The only way I think I can get free is through violence. I'm going to kill you and laugh while your loved ones cry. I'm better than you. I'm the devil. It's possible that Bryan felt empowered by this rap because a few days later, Bryan responded to a thread titled "The Benefit of Our Disease," where users were sharing what, if anything, VS has done to change their lives for the better. And Bryan said, "I have become very deep and determined on goals. It made me smarter." So it's clear from his posts and his rap that Bryan was experiencing an intense array of emotions from his struggles with VS, while also dealing with the struggles of, just being a teenager. And after the rap came out, his posts are less about visual snow and more about his emotional state. And it's not good. Like, he makes a huge long post titled "Can You Relate?" And in it, he describes his darkness, including, "I have had this horrible depersonalization go on in my life for almost 2 years." And he also says, "I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth, as I am starting to view everyone as this." Continuing, he says, "As my family group hugs and celebrates, I am stuck in this void of nothing, feeling completely no emotion, feeling nothing." Or this one, "As I hug my family, I look into their faces, I see nothing. It is like I'm looking at a video game, but less. I am stuck in the depths of my mind where I have to constantly battle my demons. Am I here or am I fake? I feel myself slipping away. I hear screams faintly, but I constantly battle away from it. What if I let go?" The thing is, a total just wall of text that is just riddled in despair. And honestly, I feel like some of the sentiments he's shared are things that I have felt, some of them, not all of it, but I feel like a lot of us has felt trapped or stuck or in darkness and just that aloneness, And remember, he's about 16 years old at this point, so still not an adult. His brain is still developing, and he's expressing some pretty dark, distressing stuff that I think no person should have to live with. Now, it goes on, and because of what we suspect he did now, this one is particularly troubling in a way. "When I was 15, I would wander alone at 2 a.m. Everything was so generic, nothing felt like home. I saw things that were not there, a different reality. I felt eerie and alone. I died during those nights. I felt like a criminal, but where was my record?" Literally, it gives me chills thinking about this stuff, but we get another glimpse. He's up late at night and he can't sleep because of the VS, presumably. And again, this was back when he was 15. Seems like he was still wandering the streets all these years later, unfortunately. And that feeling like a criminal, but where's my record? I mean, listen, I am not by any means a mental health professional. This is purely my speculation after the fact, but it kind of makes me wonder, is this feeling of being a criminal, of being so detached, did this feeling fester for so long that it could have grown into something else or an obsession? Could this have been the starting place where he became interested in criminology, which he later was working on his PhD for? Is this kind of the foundational layer, amongst other things? It is as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all of the demons in my head mocking me. I fall asleep, but I wake up quickly to bloody screams. Is any of this here? Am I brain damaged? No? Then why am I like this? I have these thoughts in my head. I search for someone to relate to me. Everyone looks down upon me. No one can relate. And then he finishes the post with, "Nothing I do is enjoyable. I am blank. I have no opinion. I have no emotion. I have nothing. Can you relate?" Now, obviously in hindsight, if Bryan is guilty of this heinous thing that took the lives of Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan, then these posts are incredibly disturbing. But also, and I know that some people might be annoyed at me saying this if they don't care about the potential, psychological aspect of this case. And I am certainly not diminishing the severity of what has happened now. There is no excuse or justification for what Bryan allegedly did to these beautiful young people. But I do think, looking at potential root behavior, thought patterns, and the mental development of someone who allegedly committed such an atrocious act is important. And I think that these posts are both insightful and also heartbreaking. Like, does it excuse what I believe he likely did to Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan? No, absolutely not. Does this give some potential insight inside the mind of a man who was capable of doing this? It might. Is it important to study and try to identify warning signs and cries for help like this to try to prevent a brutal crime in the future? I think so. Like, let me know your thoughts in the comments on that. I mean, think about it. Like, at the time of these posts, this was a teenager saying these things, you know, a 15, 16-year-old. There is no way that someone could ever convince me that a child or a developing teenager deserves to struggle with this kind of depression and anxiety and feeling of emptiness. Like, not to make this about me in any way, but just as, you know, an example to illustrate. I have lived much of my life with depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, and I know many of you watching have dealt with that as well. For me, it started when I was very young from being groomed and abused as a child by much older men, and is just now something that I am just learning to process as an adult. So I can't help but feel terrible for that 15-year-old kid who was struggling with this, because 15-year-olds can't possibly fully process these types of feelings alone. Like, imagine what would you feel right now if a teenager came to you and said the following. I always feel as if I'm not there, completely depersonalized. Mentally, I experience fog, lack of comprehension at some times, feel like my life is a movie, depersonalization, depression, no interest in activity, constant thoughts of crazy thoughts, delusions of grandeur, anxiety, poor self-image, poor social skills, no emotion. I feel like nothing has a point to it. When I get home, I am mean to my family. This started when VS did. I feel no emotion, and along with the depersonalization, I can say and do whatever I want with little remorse. Everyone hates me. Pretty much, I am an a-hole. Those phrases, depersonalization, poor social skills, no emotion, in all caps, and saying that he's mean to his family, I can say and do whatever I want with little remorse. That's some scary shit. Like, were these feelings a precursor? Did anyone know that he was feeling these things? If he is the culprit now, could this have been prevented if someone intervened? We know from many sources and people who went to school with him that he was bullied constantly in high school, and like bullied for his weight, for being, you know, socially awkward and a loner, you know, all that bullshit, you know, the things that jackass kids bully other kids for to make them feel worthless. So if you take Bryan's chronic medical condition of VS and pair that with being bullied relentlessly during that same time in his developmental years and him lashing out at his family, I would imagine that someone at some point may have noticed something with him, but maybe it wasn't addressed. This is why I feel so strongly that discussing mental health should never be stigmatized. It is amazing to me that it's 2023 and we still have to plead for accessible, free mental health services in school and proper mental health education and awareness for children and adults and families. Like, if Bryan is guilty, maybe, and I don't know, but maybe if there had been some intervention for the child Bryan, maybe Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan would still be here enjoying their lives. Sadly, we will never know, which just adds to how devastating all of this is. A few months later, Bryan posts his final message on Tate Talk. I have just accepted my visual snow finally. I don't even feel the need to stay away from the forum. It doesn't scare me anymore. Anyone else come to terms? I feel like coming to terms could be a bad thing though. Now, we know that shortly after this, at least as early as 2013, Bryan started doing H. So is the stress of visual snow what ultimately pushed him to it? Was he looking for relief or some place to lose himself? Was it the bullying? Was it going to happen regardless? These are all questions that I would love to get to the bottom of. Don't know if we ever will. Now, we don't know much about what happened to Bryan during the time that he was using H and when he was in rehab, but by 2018, Bryan was messaging friends on Facebook about bettering his state of mind, about, using his so-called deep determination to pursue a career in criminology. And it appeared to be going well. In May of 2018, Bryan wrote in a Facebook message that he had only ever used H when he was considering kicking the bucket, and that in the midst of his depression, he had developed a weird sense of meaning. I have since really learned a lot. Not a person alive could convince me to use it, referring to H. So great. All of this sounds like a great turnaround to his life, unless, of course, that weird sense of meaning to his life was that he decided he did in fact want to do something criminal so that he could have a record, and was taking his time planning a crime. Now, with Bryan's more prominent social media profiles, like his Instagram, being deleted in the wake of his arrest, it's hard to know exactly what he got up to, like socially during the years that he was studying criminal psychology. But we know from statements from his fellow students that he was an intellectual type, that he was always kind of trying to be the smartest guy in the room, very like, I'm the guy, and like, I'm gonna prove it to everyone kind of vibes, like that kind of guy. And I feel like that's not unlike how he was always kind of arguing on the Tappa Talk forum. So Bryan gets to college and he's a great student and all that, he's got his goals. And then he gets to the point that he starts to need to do research in his field, part of the whole PhD process. So what does he do? He posts a survey, of course, just like he did as a teenager, onto a niche web forum, just like he did with Tappa Talk. Let's dive in.
The posts say, I am inviting you to participate in a research project that seeks to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. Posts on Reddit appeared in June and have since been removed from the platform. Prosecutors introduced an affidavit written by Moscow, Idaho police, which confirmed the Reddit posts were made by Kohberger.
Now, before we get started on the content of the Reddit survey, I do want to clear up one thing about how a PhD and research typically works. So I saw quite a few people online questioning why Bryan would have been involved in research at his former university, DeSales, when he would be starting at a new school, Washington State University, just a few months later. And they were pointing to it as suspicious. So essentially, that's how college-level doctorate research works. PhD students carry research from one institution to another, often in pursuit of specific resources at a new university, or because the new university that they're transferring to has an interest in the specific research that they're already conducting. So research can be a large part of what a university considers when people apply to it as a PhD candidate. So it's not weird for him to have been doing research, at every opportunity he had while he was pursuing a doctorate, because it is a massive undertaking. And aside from all of that, he also did list 2 other colleagues at DeSales as being involved with the survey, both of whom are listed in more senior positions than he was. So it's important to remember while going over this that others were involved in conducting the survey, and we don't currently know exactly how much of this was written by Bryan, nor his total level involvement. Though I will say the survey literally starts off with, my name is Bryan and I am inviting you to participate in a research project. So yeah, I kind of feel like Bryan was pretty involved. It also goes on to state, this research has been approved by the DeSales University IRB. And I want to note that his contact information is also listed first. Let's take a look at the questions Bryan and his associates were asking and see if there's some insight about what fueled his extensive drive to pursue a career learning, the ins and outs of the criminal mind. So the survey, which was first captured by the Wayback Machine on May 31st, 2022, opens with this. Please note that the following survey asks you to detail your most recent criminal offense, whether you were caught or not. In the event that you were not charged, convicted, or incarcerated for the offense, you may still participate in this research. So, calling all criminals, I'm just here to do research. Now, the next paragraph and the first few questions are pretty basic, general background and setup for the kinds of questions that will come next. But it does say that the survey is mainly concerned with like how emotions and psychological traits influence the decision-making involved in committing a crime, and asks people responding to detail your thoughts, emotions, and actions from the beginning to end of the crime commission process. Now, the first one that I think is interesting. So number 9, what category best represents your most recent crime? Property offense, violent offense, drug offense, or other? Please explain. Now, this is the first question that starts to get into the kinds of details the survey is looking for. It's kind of a standard way of breaking down respondents by their specific experiences. But I bring it up because the rest of the questions the survey has don't fit all these criminal profiles. Like, for example, if you're a drug criminal, chances are your crime was non-violent. According to the US Department of Justice, 4/5 of drug arrests are just for possession, and less than 10% of them involve some kind of assault. But the questions the survey asks largely assume a kind of perspective that the person responding is violent and that they're targeting or stalking someone or something. For example, in question number 12, the survey asks, at the time of the crime, please indicate the following. Did you struggle with or fight the victim? We see other examples of this theme. For example, questions 14 and 15 ask, did you prepare for the crime before leaving your home? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this point. How did you travel to and enter the location that the crime occurred? Now, the question is, do these oddly specific and somewhat leading questions mean anything on their own? Not really. Like, these can easily be explained away as educational research, but when you think back to the very first post he made on Tapatalk, remember that? The survey where he just, sort of casually slipped in those little windows into his thoughts, kind of mixed in with the questions. It sort of makes you wonder why he'd place such a specific question somewhere it doesn't really belong. Like, the questions get a whole lot creepier from there. Like in question 17, why did you choose that victim or target over others? Before making your move, how did you approach the victim or target? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling. Before leaving, is there anything else you did? How did you leave the scene? After committing the crime, what were you thinking and feeling? Look, I know that this is a survey for his research, that he was a candidate for a PhD, okay? I know, I promise, I know. It's just so hard to retroactively, to read these questions as anything other than him putting together kind of like a killer handbook, like Unaliving for Dummies or something. Especially given how close the timeline is, right? From when he posted this survey, it was just a few months to when Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan were taken from this world. It does make you wonder about the possibility that genuinely skilled criminals, if that's what you want to call them, okay, I guess it's a skill set, they may have responded to this and essentially gave Bryan that how-to guide on what to do and how to do it and what to expect you're going to be feeling, how to prepare, all of those things. And so pair that with his intense studies in criminology and his mental health history, talking about, the demons, the bloody screams, and feeling like a criminal with no record, do things with no remorse, and you potentially have the perfect storm of a very dangerous, very capable suspect. Let's talk about the next two questions. Question 24. Over the past 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by any of the following problems? Feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, not being able to stop or control worrying. And question 25. Over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by any of the following problems? Little interest or pleasure in doing things, feeling down, depressed, or hopeless, feeling bad about yourself or that you are a failure or have let yourself or your family down, thoughts you would be better off unalived, or hurting yourself. Do any of these motions sound familiar? right? Like they sound a lot like some of Bryan's posts on Tappa Talk from more than 10 years earlier. And when I think about how people who knew Bryan said that he was detached and a loner, always trying to find community and fit in, what if these feelings of isolation and despair that he had as a teen just continued to deepen and darken through years of bullying and maybe not getting treatment? And remember what I covered in part 1, Bryan actually applied for an internship at the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022, literally just weeks before the terrible events and very shortly after this Reddit survey. Now, if Bryan is the guy, and remember, like, innocent until proven otherwise, I have to keep telling myself that, but if he is guilty, was Bryan using the survey at DeSales to learn more about criminals or about himself? Could this be related to his motive? Was Bryan trying to see what traits he shared with violent criminals? Was Bryan wanting to intern for the police to learn more for his PhD? Or was Bryan planning these attacks and wanted to make friends with the police department so he knew how they would investigate? Or did he hope that he would be able to participate in investigating his own crime as an intern afterwards? We can't say for sure, but this it's a lot. It's creepy and it's a lot to think about.
A couple of sources with knowledge of the investigation have told News Nation some details that up until now we did not know.
Okay, so everything that we've talked about so far has been based off of stuff we can reliably and easily link to Bryan. Boom, done, okay? Allegedly. Now, we're going to get into stuff that is less official, stuff we only know from like one source or anonymous sources, but since it is out there, we might as well discuss it and see if it fits with the rest of these pieces that we've been pulling together here. And I want to start with Bryan's Instagram. So according to friends of the victims and even including their parents, Bryan wasn't among their circle of friends. Like, they didn't know each other, at least not publicly or any like significant way. And now that the gag order has been issued on the case, we probably won't hear anything more substantial about what kind of connections they may have had until the trial time, if that happens. But we do have bits and pieces, so these are little speculative bits. See, Bryan Kohberger's Instagram may have been quickly deleted following his arrest, but that doesn't mean People didn't get a look beforehand. Literally, People magazine claims to have been able to see Bryan's Instagram shortly after he was arrested, despite not having any screenshots to share. Now, I get it. Sometimes People magazine is just like, I be giving them the side eye on more than one occasion, okay? But here we are. So People claims that while the account was active and viewable, they confirmed that he was following Xana Kernodle, KYLIE Gonzalez, and Madison Mogen, all three of the young women. Now, the source in People doesn't specify whether or not he was also following Ethan Chapin, who was, Xana's boyfriend, but the implication is that he wasn't, and it also didn't mention whether he was following either of the two surviving roommates. Now, what's more, according to the source, Bryan was actually messaging one of the victims he suspected of unaliving only a couple of weeks before the crime took place. Now, we don't know which victim they're alluding to. We don't know how many times or how often he was messaging her. We don't even know exactly what he said. We don't have screenshots, nothing, okay? So at this point, like, we got to keep all of that in mind as I read these quotes. He slid into one of the girls' DMs several times, but she didn't respond. Basically, it was just him saying, "Hey, how are you?" But he did it again and again. Then Steve Helling, the reporter who got the story for People, added a few more details when he was interviewed by Newsweek, saying these weren't angry messages, these weren't even SUL messages, these were just him saying, "Hey," and when she didn't respond, saying, "Hey," again and again and again. He never expressed any anger, like, "Why aren't you responding to me?" or "You stuck up B word." That's not what he was doing. He was just trying to make some sort of contact. Now, we'll keep going, but I do have a question. How did this person see any of these supposed messages? even if they did see his account before it was taken down, like, did they hack his account and see his outgoing messages? There's a lot of questions. Like, the fact that they don't even reveal how it would be possible for them to see these messages is kind of suspicious as fuck. Okay, but then Helling goes on to say that the public doesn't know which victim Bryan was messaging and said, "We don't, the police certainly do." So maybe it's legit, which infers that his source would have been a police officer of some sort, but also I'm pretty sure that they're not supposed to be leaking info to the press. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess like this, it happens, right? It happens. And like, you know, a lot of people are happy that it happens because it gives us information, but we just hope leaking stuff doesn't ruin or harm the investigation or the pending trial. Right. So the question, did Bryan not expect Ethan to be there? Was he only targeting Xana, Maddie, and KYLIE? The other thing is that, again, if this is true, it leaves little room for doubt that he was watching these girls for a period of time. And we know from the affidavit that his cell phone hooked onto the same cell tower that services the Kings Road house a dozen times in the months leading up to the crime. And we know all of those times were in the late evening or super early morning. You know, again, reminds me when he was 15, posting on Tapatalk about walking the streets at 2 a.m. feeling like a criminal. So we assumed he was stalking them when we initially heard about that, right? Then considering that he didn't go to their school, he was, you know, almost 10 years older than them, he would have wanted to get information about them, and where better than their Instagram? This seems like a logical conclusion that if he was stalking Maddie or KYLIE or Xana or all three of them, he could have very well been following them on Instagram and could easily have reached out to one of them. This leads me to our next piece of hearsay, because apparently if this is true, then Bryan Kohberger crossed paths with at least two of the victims before that horrific night at a restaurant called Mad Greek in Moscow, where Maddie and Xana both worked as servers. So this one is going to be very difficult to verify until some evidence shows up in trial. So I will say that while this is certainly a possibility, it is not confirmed by any means that Bryan had come in there to eat at least twice, and both times ordered a vegan pizza. But they didn't confirm whether or not he ever interacted with Xana or Maddie. The only reason that they remember him standing out was because of his order. Now, the source says that Bryan was extremely specific about how he wanted his food prepared, and that he was specific about not allowing his food to touch with the same surfaces as animal products. Now, looking at the Mad Greek menu, they have a lot of what you might think, like hummus, pita, gyros, tahiti, you know, Greek food, or, you know, at least like the mainstream Americanized Greek food. But that's not all they have on their menu, because they also have pizza, and in the pizza and calzone section, there is where we find the one vegan item. One. The only one. Kira's amazing vegan pizza. I hear it's amazing, which sort of matches up with how he's being described by the anonymous source. In fact, we have so many sources about his diet that this former employee could have made up this story and used that detail to make the story sound more believable. We have to leave room for that possibility. Let's look at a map real quick. So Mad Greek, where Xana and Maddie worked, is 1.3 miles from their house on Kings Road. This is the same part of town that Maddie and KYLIE were at before returning home on that horrific night. Now, remember from the first doc that they were hanging out at Corner Club, which is just a few blocks away from Mad Greek. And all of this is a little over 9 miles across state lines from Bryan's apartment and university. And again, this is speculation, but just hear me out for a second. I could understand Bryan ending up there like one time, being in downtown Moscow for like whatever reason, you know, but to go there at least 2 times to a place that only has one vegan item, where virtually everything else on the menu has meat, and he has this extremely vegan diet, doesn't that sound like he went there for some other reason? Is this vegan pizza really that good? Like, there isn't even a picture on the Yelp page, okay? If y'all didn't take a photo of it on Yelp page, then I don't trust it, okay? Just kidding. But I would think that he probably cooks most of his meals himself so that he has control of every ingredient. And when he eats out, he most likely goes to places that specialize in strict vegan cooking. But if this former employee is telling the truth that Bryan came in there more than once and ordered this vegan pizza and was super specific about it, not being cooked in any pots, blah, 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 then it is very likely that he came there for different reasons than the food. And a lot of evidence does suggest that the 12 visits to the house in the months leading up to it, the Instagram following and messaging, if it's true, then showing up at their place of work would seem more likely than not. Now, People magazine has another claim to support this former employee. People has also confirmed via an investigator familiar with the case that law enforcement is aware of the restaurant visits and that investigators have interviewed employees and owners of the Mad Greek. They have also collected surveillance video from the restaurant and surrounding businesses. Now, just so you know, the owner of the restaurant has come out and said that this is not true and that Bryan never ate at the restaurant. In a Facebook post, the Mad Greek owner said, "The news media should really do their due diligence before running a story with completely fabricated information. This will be my only response to this story from People. It is not true. This person who wants their 5 minutes of fame has now caused a whole bunch of extra work for myself and the investigators." Okay, two things real quick, and this is not meant to like shade anybody and the restaurant owner, but like, how the hell would you know if this was true or not? Like, I don't know, like, do you have personal memory and records of every single person that has been at your restaurant for months or years? And then to say that this anonymous former employee wants their 5 minutes of fame by, wait for it, remaining anonymous? Is that how fame works? Like, you just, like, you're anonymously famous, okay? I understand wanting to dispel the rumors, and I'm sure that the restaurant owners there have been contacted and visited by people, and it's just such probably a nightmare to a degree. But to flat out say that it's not true, I feel like could make a lot of people think, well, then obviously it is true. To all media reporters, internet sleuths, etc., please allow us to grieve the loss of our friends and co-workers. This has been incredibly hard on us, with reporters banging on my door at my private residence and hunting down employees as well as showing up constantly at the restaurant. We have not been afforded the time to grieve. Please stop calling, messaging, knocking, and showing up. I personally will not be doing any interviews or entertaining wild accusations at this time. Obviously, people shouldn't be harassing. That's effed up. And certainly people should not be looking up people's home addresses and things. That is creepy. That's stalkery. Stop it. Get some help.
Stop it. Get some help.
It was in the middle floor. So to me, he doesn't have to go upstairs. His entry and exit are available without having to go upstairs or downstairs.
Okay, so we also need to talk about Papa Roger. Who, what, where, why, what is that? Well, if you haven't heard, there's been speculation that Bryan got involved in some online discussions about the horrible events after it happened, but before he was arrested, which if it is true, it's absolutely sickening. I can't really like allow my brain to fully go there. This case is just really f***ed up, like really, really f***ed up. And if this Papa Roger stuff is in fact true, then it's just even worse than, yeah. So I want to point out that it's actually not uncommon for murderers and serial killers to sort of insert themselves into the conversation around their cases. Ted Bundy and Charles Manson come to mind, but there's also other famous cases like the Zodiac, who demanded that his letters be printed in San Francisco newspapers, and Dennis Rader, BTK, who left behind letters in public libraries to taunt the police. So Dr. Scott A. Bond writes in this Psychology Today article that serial like BTK are often driven by a need to show off and to outsmart others. He says, perhaps no serial killer ever relished or participated more heavily in the construction of his own public image than the BTK. Dennis Rader was determined to establish a brand name for himself and attract public notoriety. And we know that Bryan took a class on serial killers and studied BTK while attending DeSales University from Professor Catherine Ramsland, who has interviewed BTK and written many articles and books on serial killers. Now, it all begins with an account on Facebook called Papa Roger, an extremely active member of a discussion group dedicated to this case. Now, keep in mind, the group has since gone private, so all we have is a collection of screenshots from when the group was public, viewing the posts at different times. Now, it's a lot of posts and also kind of difficult to piece together a complete timeline, but I've done my best to try to pick some of the key posts and put them in order to try to determine if this is or is not Bryan posting as Papa Roger. So let's start with a big one. On November 30th, of the evidence released, the murder weapon has been consistent as a large fixed blade knife. This leads me to believe they found the sheath. This evidence was released prior to autopsies. Well, the autopsies were conducted on November 17th, but there was zero mention of a sheath and definitely no mention of them finding one. Now, we now know there was in fact a sheath found from the probable cause affidavit, but that wasn't released until January 5th. So how could Papa Roger know about a sheath? The suspect would know, or possibly an investigator that's working on the case. I believe the killer came from the high side of the house. They were covered in blood after the attack. Now, the high side of the house is where the sliding glass door is that we now know that's where he entered, which the public did not know at this time of the post. So you've got the sheath and you've got the entry point, both being discussed by this Papa Rogers before that information was made public. How would you know? Bryan, allegedly, but KYLIE's father did say that the police told him the attacker entered through the second-story sliding glass doors, but that wasn't until December 4th, around the same time the police were making the claim.
They've said the entry point was the slider or the window. It was in the middle floor.
Now, I think that everyone believed that the intruder would have had to be covered in blood. And I think that because one of the surviving roommates saw a man in all black with a mask, you know, covering the nose and mouth, and given Bryan's extensive criminology background, I think it's likely that he anticipated the amount of blood and could have been wearing something like a hazmat suit. This also could explain him not having a belt to attach the knife sheath, which is just, you know, in theory, of course, and I still kind of wonder if he actually staged that knife sheath there, left it intentionally, not realizing that essentially his DNA was on it. Then on December 1st, Papa Rogers posts this picture and says, "This is on the high side of the house. They found evidence here. It is likely dripping from the killer. Either they fled through this area or they were parked there. This being the most strategic entrance points to the house, it shows planning." Again, we now know from the affidavit that the white Hyundai Elantra was seen coming and going up Queens Road, which is a dead-end street around the back of the house. Then a couple of days later, on December 5th, Papa Rogers posts this. "Based on the evidence, this is where I believe Xana was found." We had heard at this time that all four of them were attacked in their beds while they were asleep. So yes, it seems likely that Xana was found in her room, and likely her bed was up against that wall. And now that there have been all kinds of house models and like 3D renderings, I have to wonder, did Bryan have a layout of the house before the attack? You know, like it seems like he was stalking them for months, so I wouldn't be surprised if he looked at Zillow or Redfin and knew every inch of that house and exactly whose room was where. You could just look through, you know, watching through the windows and seeing activity. And this is where I get chills up my spine. On December 8th, he posts, "Thoughts on this body placement?" And Papa Rogers suggests Ethan is outside of Xana's room in that little hallway. Now remember, at this time in early December, we thought this was wrong. We thought that Ethan and Xana were both found in Xana's room, and we thought that they were found in Xana's bed. But literally just this past week, we learned that according to several sources, Ethan was in fact found outside of Xana's bedroom.
With knowledge of the investigation, have told News Nation some details that up until now we did not know. They said that Ethan Chapin was killed in the doorway of Xana Kernodle's room before the killer set upon Xana. The sources say that it appeared Ethan had stepped partly into the hallway,
which just makes this whole like Papa Rogers things super creepy. There are just so many little details, the knife sheath, the point of entry, where Ethan was found. And the other thing that I want to point out here is that Papa Roger has no empathetic emotion to the victims. He is purely focusing on the crime, and he's not actually saying anything bad about the crime, just focused on how it was done. It was just very, very cold. If this was Bryan. And as soon as the white car is brought to the public's attention, again, this is when they announce, they're interested in a white sedan and it may be helpful to the investigation. When they say this, Papa Rogers posts, "I feel like the white car isn't relevant." We know that, of course, the white car is super relevant from all affidavits, and that's how they learned to investigate Bryan in the first place. So if Papa Roger is in fact Bryan, is he trying to throw any potential internet sleuths off? Or, the police? Are the police looking at this Papa Roger's account? I think yes, 100% that they are now, but were they looking at it in December? I don't know. We don't know. But he doubles down on it several days later with, "The white car is a red herring." At some point, Papa Rogers mockingly says, "Breaking news, a white car is driving somewhere in the Americas." So suddenly there's some sarcasm and some very cold humor. Clearly he wants to throw the white car out of the discussion, right? Is that because it could lead to him? I think so. And it seems like he still thinks that they won't be able to figure out the license plate, or they won't be able to look into everyone as a white Hyundai Elantra, which of course we find out they have ways of narrowing down that search until they find someone to look into. And if this is Bryan, did he not realize that they would be able to track his movements for months prior? Bryan. So Papa Roger is not interested in any empathy to the victims. Knows things about the case that he wouldn't know if he was just part of the rest of the general public, and wants this white car to go away. So he doesn't want the perpetrator to get caught, I guess. Okay, got it. Next. So get this, in between those posts, he's asking the group a lot of questions, clearly an attempt to get them to talk about the case. Why do you think the killer uses a knife? Why'd the killer choose that house? Why'd they spare the dog? Did they take a shower afterwards? When they ask, what do we think is the entrance point to the crime scene? Well, Papa Rogers already said a week prior that the attacker came from the high side of the house, which would infer the sliding door again to the kitchen, which we know is true. Now, they keep posting questions, and then on December 11th, they post this one. How long do we think the was in the house? And when someone asks Papa Roger what they think, he responds, 15 minutes. Y'all. 15 minutes. That is exactly correct, as we've learned from the affidavit. Remember, this is before the public had an idea whatsoever what happened. At this point, all the public had been told was that it took place between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. There are just so many correct details for Papa Roger to narrow it down to 15 minutes. And these are details that no one could have known unless it's an investigator just, leaking, flapping those loose lips. Then this, I think, is the damn dude who did the thing. I mean, honestly, who else could it be besides Bryan, allegedly, relishing in his horrific acts? And I think this is just disgusting. It's so disturbing. Now, then Papa Rogers keeps the discussion going, asking more questions and even circling back, around to the same questions, like, not a new post from me, but still very relevant. How long was the in the house? He already asked and answered that 2 days before. It seems like he is very much reliving this, and people talking about it, it's kind of like getting him off in a way, which is just so vulgar, and it is just so gross, y'all, if this is him and if he's guilty. Then Papa Roger posts, "Fight me. Law enforcement is no closer to solving this than they were 30 days ago." So if this is Bryan, then he is now bragging about law enforcement not catching him. Where does that sound familiar? And at the same time, he's literally asking for a verbal fight so that he could argue with people on how he thinks they are not going to catch him and that he's smarter than them. Again, if this is him, then he is keeping those conversations going, prolonging this experience for himself, which which is just so morally bankrupt. It is sick. And again, it's like Papa Roger wants the group to think he is smarter. As many people said that about Bryan, that he had a tendency to do that and get in arguments. Now, he keeps doing this, and then these last two posts are again statements, not questions about the crime. Day 39, the killer is not in the victim's immediate circle, and the killer is not a student. Thoughts? Again, statements as if they are facts, which are not known to the public at the time, but they are all true. Apparently, there's speculation that he was kicked out of the discussion group right before he was arrested, and the discussion group has been shut down since the arrest. But either way, guess what Facebook users hasn't posted on Facebook at all since Bryan's arrest? Papa Roger. He just poof, gone. Just gone. Right when Bryan's arrested. So you tell me, do you think that Bryan is Papa Roger? Now, I have to assume that the police have looked through this Papa Roger account, and we may find out someday that they were able to tie it to Bryan's cell phone or computer or IP address. But for now, this is, all just speculation.
They said that Ethan Chapin was in the doorway of Xana Kernodle's room before the killer set upon Xana.
So you learn a lot about the psyche of people who commit crime. And so you sort of get into the heads of all those people. You also learn about crime scenes, about what to look for, and you get a real indicator about how the whole system works, basically, how police investigate cases, etc. Because your job, once you leave graduate school, is to be the person that can look at crimes and figure out what happened and why it happened.
So that catches us up on some of the most compelling online posts that Bryan has made, and all those posts that we still don't know for sure if it's him. I hope at some point more information does come out to give us more clarity about all of this, but time will tell. There is just so much more to this case, and we will continue to dive even deeper as new information comes out, and I will be covering his upcoming court dates and if this goes to trial. And let me know if there are any specific things that you want me to research and dive into. Just leave those in the comments and I'll be going through. Now, please do excuse the tone shift for a quick moment because I need to say a couple of things at the end of all of my docs, but thank you for continuing to watch and share and support these. We just hit 400,000 subscribers here, which is truly mind-blowing. Like, you all being a part of our community really means so much to me, and I hope that we can continue to be a community where we support victims and survivors and their families and call out the bull when we see it, okay? Thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Be sure to tap the link in the description and use code SWOOP8 to get 55% off Scentbird and treat yourself to the self-care you deserve, honey. Again, I am so grateful to even have sponsors, and thank you for checking them out as well week after week. Your support of the docs and checking out and clicking on the sponsors is what makes these donations even possible. And I will be donating a portion of the proceeds to the Xana Kernodle Scholarship Endowment and the Ethan Chapin Memorial Scholarship Fund. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, linked below. That is where I post every day and give you updates on the cases that we cover here, and also talk to y'all and also respond to a lot of your messages. A couple of Twitter shout outs from my last doc, which was part 1 of this case. First shout out goes to CW, who says, such an in-depth doc about this horrible, senseless crime. I had seen so many stories put out about this story and never read into it. So glad Swoop covered everything. Great job, Swoop. Can't wait for part 2. I'm just so thankful to be able to hopefully provide a little clarity with these docs. And second shout out goes to Peggy Lou who says, Wednesday Catums is enthralled with the latest Spanky V documentary. And listen, Wednesday Catums, that is the cutest name for a cat. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that picture. I want to once again send my deepest condolences to the victims' families and friends, and to the survivors as well. As this case continues and the more information about the suspect hopefully comes forward, I hope that we can all keep Maddie, KYLIE, Xana, and Ethan in our hearts and minds, remembering always that these were real people with lovely lives that should have been protected rather than preyed upon. While it's always innocent until proven otherwise, guys. I hope that if police do have the right person, that justice is quick and thorough, leaving no room for doubt, so that these families eventually have time to grieve in whatever time that they need. And while nothing that happens moving forward will bring back their loved ones, I hope in time that they find some sort of peace and that their memories will always be a blessing. And I'll finish this with some words from those who knew and loved KYLIE, Xana, Maddie, and Ethan the best.
They were like a month apart, and Maddie's came first, and she would always get frustrated because KYLIE would always go all out, just make everything perfect for her, and it was like almost like a little competition between the two who could make their birthdays better, and I guess it was a repeating thing throughout the years of them knowing each other.
Xana was the funniest person I knew and made me laugh every time I spent time with her. She was my baby sister, but she was so much wiser and experienced so much more in life than I ever have.
They had this unstoppable, loving relationship. They both would look at each other with so much love. Everyone knew they were the perfect duo. They both were the kind of people who cared about everyone and would help anyone. Xana was the life of the party. If she was there, it was going to be great.
Most important is love. Like it's the only thing you know how. At the end of the day, all of this means nothing. This page, where we're sitting, your job, the money, nothing even matters except love and human connection. Who you love and how deeply you love them. How you touch the people around you and how much you give them.
Take care of one another. I'll see you very soon with a new doc. Swoop!